Hello, my name is Tristan Moss. I am the project manager from eMetric for the computer-based testing online portal and test delivery system. Today I'm going to be going over some important information for anybody who is going to be proctoring or acting as a test administrator for the grades 3 through 8 ELA and math assessments. The student tutorials require a kiosk this year. There will be no browser-based practice tests. There's also a clear cache link in the lower left-hand corner of the kiosk. There's a loading visual for session selection whenever the student selects either session 1 or session 2. The text-to-speech tool has been revamped to include rate adjustment, volume adjustment, and text-to-speech on demand. And the zoom feature has been enhanced to allow students to zoom up to 300%. All student devices should have the 2018 kiosk or mobile app installed on them by the district IT coordinator. All site readiness tests should also be completed, and sites should be certified for testing by the district IT coordinator. If that has not happened for your school, or if your classes or if your students don't have access to the kiosk or the mobile app, please contact your district ITC. This is some important information regarding stale responses. Make sure that students test on one device. Switching devices during testing could result in stale responses. So if a student absolutely has to switch devices, make sure that you contact the service desk first. They will be able to make sure that the student's responses from the first device have been sent to the server and that there won't be any stale responses if the student needs to move devices. If a student is in between test sessions, they can definitely switch devices and there won't be any stale responses. This is only important if the student is in the middle of a test session and needs to switch devices. To launch the kiosk, the student will either click on the desktop icon or a network folder. They'll see the student sign-in page with their username and password box, and using the logins that you either printed or provided to the students, they'll enter their usernames and passwords and click the sign-in button. As I told you a few minutes ago, the students will need access to the session access codes, so those are available within the administration component, and they're also available on the first page of those login printouts. The student will be prompted to enter the session access code, and then they'll click Submit to enter the appropriate session. Some important information about pausing the test. Notes written in the notepad and any markups made by the highlighting tool or the sketch tool will not persist if a student pauses the test. And if a student pauses the test for longer than 30 minutes, the proctor will need to enter the proctor password in order for the student to continue testing. Students will be prompted to enter the proctor password in this text box. The student should never know what the proctor password is. It must be kept confidential. So the proctor or the test administrator will enter the password and click Submit to allow the student to continue testing. The kiosk interface will look like this. In the upper left corner, students will have access to a test map by clicking on that downward black arrow. They also are able to view the question that they're currently on, or they're able to click on that star icon to bookmark an item to remind themselves later to revisit if they need to. In the lower left corner, you have access to a toolbox, so any of the universal tools, or if a student has the color contrast accommodation, those will all appear in the lower left corner. In the upper right corner, you can see a green dot. That is the network indicator. That is the connectivity indicator. So if that dot is gray, that means that the student's device has lost connection. If it's green, it means that they're still connected. Students probably won't notice this, but if the proctor is aware, you can kind of keep your eye on this as you're walking around the room during the student's testing. In the lower right corner are the navigation buttons. Students can click Next, Back, Pause Test, or Clear. On the last item, a Finish button will appear next to that Next button. And then in the upper middle of the kiosk interface, students will have access to the Screen Zoom button, and if they have a text-to-speech accommodation, they'll have access to those text-to-speech controls as well. Universal tools are available to all students on computer-based tests. Students will have access to a guideline or a line reading tool. They'll have access to the answer masking tool, sketch and highlight, notepad, screen zoom, reverse contrast, and custom masking. Item tools are available to all students on specific test items. On the grades 3 through 6 math tests, some items give students access to a basic calculator. On the grades 7 through 8 math tests, some items give students access to a scientific calculator. And then on various items throughout all grade levels of the math tests, students will be given access to a ruler. Accommodations are available to specific students based on the assignment made in the administration component. The accommodations are text-to-speech mathematics, text-to-speech essay, color contrast, and turn off all universal tools. So if this accommodation is selected, then the student won't have access to any of these universal tools from our previous slide. If a student has accommodations assigned to them, they'll see this options page upon logging into the kiosk. Here they can view their accommodations, and they can also click through them to toggle and kind of play around with different color schemes or mess around with the volume or speed of the text-to-speech voice. To exit the kiosk, on the last item, the student will click the Finish button. They'll then see a test review screen where they'll click a Turn In button, and then they'll get a confirmation question. Are you sure you want to turn in your test? They'll click the Turn In button, and that will return the student to the test session selection page where they can either select the next session or click the Exit button to exit the kiosk. We talked about 3 passwords. The student password is used by the student to log into the appropriate test. The session password is used to log the student into the appropriate test session, and the proctor password is used to log the student into the appropriate session of the test if the student paused their test for longer than 30 minutes or was inactive for longer than 60 minutes. Again, that proctor password must be kept confidential and should only be entered into the kiosk by the proctor. Student tutorials will be available starting on February 19th. Once again, they will not be available via browser. They must be taken on the kiosk. The usernames and passwords are as noted on this slide. They're also available on the DOE website.